Thom Hartmann here with you. Bill Ayers on the line with us. Bill Ayers, AYERS.org is his website. The professor in the College of Education at the University of Illinois in Chicago, holding the titles of Distinguished Professor of Education and Senior University Scholar. Of course, famous or infamous, as you may choose, ex-weatherman and friend of Barack, I guess. Bill Ayers, welcome to the show.
Good to hear your voice, Thom.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to hear yours, too. I wanted to bring you in on this topic because this is your area of expertise as an educator. And the reason why, in part, was I had a caller when the decision, the Supreme Court ruled in the New Haven firefighters case that it was a 5-4 decision. In that case, the law said that if the outcome of a test demonstrates a racial disparity, then that test cannot be used to qualify somebody or disqualify somebody for a job in civil service. And in fact, on this exam in New Haven, no African Americans and only 2 Hispanics passed, in quotes, the test, whereas most of the whites who took the test passed the test. And this was not an IQ test. This was something else. And so in the dissent, Justice Ginsburg pointed out that, if we were simply to read the law, that, obviously these white firefighters should have lost their appeal. I had a right-winger call into the show and asked me to defend affirmative action, and I went into a kind of meandering conversation about, the social capital that whites have had for hundreds of years. My mother's family came to this country in the 1600s, for example, and that African Americans have not had, but recently. But that's really not the issue. The issue is the test, and I'm not knowledgeable about that, and so I wanted to get somebody on who was, and you're, I think, one of the best people. So let me toss
Thank you.
Let me toss that to you. What's the whole issue? How is it possible that racial bias can exist in a civil service test in New Haven, Connecticut? And how does it manifest itself?
Well, the question, I think the New Haven case is interesting because it does kind of shine a light on the whole testing enterprise or the kind of testing fraud. And that is, what are we testing for? It's obvious in the New Haven case that there are a lot of ways to determine who would make a good firefighter, a lot of ways to assess that. And the question of whether this pencil and paper test did that is the question that should have been addressed. This goes back, incidentally, and you'll know this, but 40 years ago or more, the Duke Power Company in the Deep South, I think it was in Carolina, I can't remember. Was it North Carolina? I think so. They had an all-white workforce, and they were required, in certain kind of positions, they were required to open up that process to African Americans. And what they did is they instituted a test, and the test determined that all African Americans would stay out and all whites would come in. What was it based on? It was based on high school graduation. It was based on other things that had nothing to do with the work that was being required of them at the Duke Power Company. The same goes for questions of higher education. Famously, Justice Sotomayor went to Princeton on a kind of an affirmative action gesture.
Right. That got her in, but that's not how she got to the top of the class.
Well, that's exactly the point. The test doesn't measure initiative, courage, effort, imagination, preference, problem solving, all those kinds of things, hard work. And Sotomayor demonstrated those things in extreme. So, yes, she was an outstanding student. The test didn't test her capacity to do her work well at Princeton. And that's really what we're up against here. What is it we're testing for, and how does the test comport with what we say our values are? So, yes, I would say firefighter exams, police exams in Chicago, for example, have been thrown out, and they've been thrown out because they don't test for the job. They test for your class background. And that's not worthy of a democracy.
Right. We're talking with Bill Ayers. BillAyers.org is his website. Some of his recent books with Bernadine Dorn, Race Course Against White Supremacy, Teaching Toward Freedom, Moral Commitment and Ethical Action in the Classroom, A Kind and Just Parent, Fugitive Days, On the Side of the Child, Teaching the Personal and the Political. Bill, give us some examples. Make this real for us. What are some of the kinds of things that would appear on a test that you or I, as white guys who are the children of white guys who've been in this, who are not recent immigrants to this country, would get, and that somebody who grew up in the projects as an African American, even if they were able to make it through the relatively lousy public school systems that often exist in inner cities in America, probably wouldn't get?
Well, I will answer that, but you raise an important point right there, because what we ought to be doing is focusing our energy on what we know is unjust and unfair, and that is underfunded schools that have lousy, rotting facilities, and so on. But leaving that aside, let's talk a minute about cultural bias. Cultural bias exists everywhere. One great example, I don't know if you read the New Yorker. I'm addicted to the New Yorker. You can't get a New Yorker cartoon unless you have a certain amount of cultural knowledge. It doesn't have anything to do with whether you're smart, whether you're hardworking, whether you're honest. I'll give you an example. There was a cartoon a few years ago that I particularly loved, and it was a picture of a guy who looked like he was wearing a hard hat. He was standing at a phone booth in a desert, and he was carrying a hammer. And he was talking on the phone, and he said, I don't know, I heard this giant sucking sound, and here I am in Mexico. Now, you could read that, you could understand the words, but you wouldn't know what that meant unless you knew who Ross Perot was, unless you knew Ross Perot's famous statement during the debates in that election cycle where he said NAFTA is going to be a giant sucking sound and jobs are going to go to Mexico.
If you had been in the projects fighting for your life rather than watching presidential debates on TV, that cartoon would be meaningless.
Exactly. Or if you lived in another country. I mean, I've lectured all over the world, and I can tell you that humor doesn't carry well, and the reason it doesn't is because it's culturally bound. Here's two examples on tests that I saw. One, a picture of a house, and the question was, what's missing? And there was multiple choice. What's missing from this picture of a house? And the answer was a chimney. Now, what if you'd never experienced a house, or never seen a house, or never had the knowledge of a house, and what a chimney is? I mean, that's a very...
What if you'd lived in an apartment building your entire life?
Exactly. Or another one in a third grade test said the people are sitting on and it was a picture of people sitting on a porch. And one of the answers was porch, and they were sitting outside of a house on a porch. But what that requires in terms of cultural knowledge is having a counter to porch in either your life experience or in reading. Lots of kids don't. In the kids I work with, if you said the people are living in and then you left a blank, and you showed giant rectangles, they would say the projects. Kids in Iowa wouldn't be able to say the projects because they've never heard of a project or the word project used in that context. That's called cultural bias. It has nothing to do with intelligence, but more to the point, it has nothing to do with initiative, as I say, or courage, or hard work, or commitment, and those things matter too.
Right. How do we most effectively remedy this what I refer to as cultural capital, that disparity of cultural capital between racial groups in the United States?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things we need to do. First of all, we have to get over the idea that the point of school is to sort people into winners and losers along obvious kind of traditions of class and race. We have to embrace the idea that education in a democracy, different than education in any kind of authoritarian or autocratic society, education in democracy is based on a fragile but central idea, and that is the value, the incalculable value of every human being. That means we have to offer a broad curriculum so that we don't kind of collapse our sense of what it means to be an educated person into how you do on one test one day, focused only on reading and math.
Right.
The kids in Winnetka, the kids in the North Shore, in the suburbs, the kids in the private schools get arts, get sports, get after-school programs, get the chess club, and increasingly the kids who need it the most are not getting those invitations to learning, and they're being cut out. So how do we remedy this? We remedy it by investing in schools. Yep. I think we need to invest in early childhood education, investing in teachers. And again, in a democracy, we should ask ourselves a simple question, which is what the wisest and most privileged parent wants for his or her kid. That's what we should want for all kids.
Yeah, brilliantly said. Brilliantly said. BillAyers.org is the website. Bill Ayers, our guest. Bill, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Always a pleasure, Thom. Thanks very much.
Keep up the great work. 16 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann radio program. Our number 866-987-THOM, 503-796-2324 as well. We'll be picking up your calls and other news of the day right after this.